evening, everybody. My name is Ethan Mikolay. Thank you all for joining us on a Monday night. Before we begin, I'd like to share that our library's mission is to elevate community through engagement, partnership, and communication. We strive to cultivate welcoming spaces for everyone. With that comes the understanding that certain topics may be controversial. I just ask that everyone please remain respectful. At the end of the program, I will briefly go over our collection development policy and then announce the winners of the prize drawing. We may end up going a few minutes past 8:30 p.m. So if you need to leave before the prize winners are announced, we will use the contact information provided to contact you about your prize. So now I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Gina Caneva. She's an educator and communicator who's worked for years in the Chicagoland area, first as a teacher in CPS, and now as a high school librarian. She's written several columns for the Chicago Sun-Times, Chicago Tribune, and other notable news outlets about educational and political issues like the topic of tonight's presentation. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and I'll now turn the floor to Dr. Gina Caneva.
All right, thanks everybody. So the title of this presentation is Book Bans in the United States. If you'd like to take notes, some of the slides are different. Like I got here, I was like, oh, I need to change a couple of these. So there's like a couple of slides. I always like, I over plan things. So that's just the teacher in me. So I've been an educator for 21 years. I started out on the south side of Chicago as a Chicago public school high school English teacher, and then made the jump to librarian about a year and 9. And then after 15 years, I left CPS and became a high school librarian at East Leyden High School. So show of hands if you guys know where Leyden, have you heard of Leyden before? Okay, but if you haven't, it's right by O'Hare Airport. It's like right by Rosemont. It serves, I think we serve 5 communities: Franklin Park, Schiller Park, Rosemont. There's probably one more, but a little bit of Melrose Park. So that was kind of like Holland counties right around the north side of Chicago. For what we're going to talk about today, I'm just going to go through kind of like a connection that you guys may have, try to draw out the connection you may have with banned books, like why you're here, and then talk about the idea of banned books, the way I see it in my job, like as a high school librarian. I've seen it happen. I've had experiences with it 3 times in my career. And then some parallels and intersections of school libraries and book bans. Sometimes we see it differently than what they're seeing at the public library. So there'll be some time for questions at the end for both me and them. If you want to ask them questions. Ways that you can promote banned books, purchasing banned books, and just teaching banned books, the ways that I've done it. And lastly, how to prepare for book bans and fight against them. We're also, I should say, I kind of jumped ahead. We are also doing this over Zoom to a virtual audience as well. So just be mindful of that if there are any questions that arise from that too. Okay, so this part, if you have the notes on slide 3, I just asked a question for you all. You don't have to do any writing. You're not high school students like I know teaching, where I make them write. So if you want to, though, I'm kind of that narrative person. I will sit there and write, or you want to do a bullet point, go ahead. But I just want you to think about, give everybody a minute or two just to think about in their heads, what's your favorite book? This is hard if you all are readers, which I'm expecting you probably are, that you came to a library program on Monday night. It's a very hard question. Kids ask me and I'm like, I can't tell you. I can tell you 10 that I really like. So, but if you can think back to when you were in high school, what was it as a teenager? Just kind of get that in your head. If you want to jot something down, feel free. And what would you have done if someone told you then, like, you can't read this book, or even now, because some of your favorites, people are trying to ban. Okay, so what would you just say to someone that said, like, well, teenagers, they can't read this? Okay, so just think about that. If you want to jot anything down, go ahead, I'll give everybody a minute. Like, what would your response be? Let's hear from you all. What are some of your favorite books, either now or when you were a teenager? Yeah, go
When
ahead.
I was a freshman in high school, I was reading Gone with the Wind,
Yeah.
and my homeroom teacher looked at it and she said, you can't read that. You're only a freshman. I said, I have a reading grade level of 12, which is, senior in high school. Now I would go, it's revisionist history. That's not, Gone with the Wind, not something to glorify, but it opened my eyes and it set me onto my course of reading a lot about the Civil War.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I got taken in sixth grade, I got sent to the principal's office because I was reading Newton's Principia in Mathematica in basically 17th century English. I also read German in 16th century form too, so.
You got in trouble for reading.
So they shipped me there, and that was the last time I ever took a standard class. After that, it was all APs.
Okay, yeah, there's another one here, yeah, go ahead.
I like science fiction and The Hobbit, the trilogy, the whole, or whatever it was. It just stuck with me for years.
Yeah. These are great examples.
I actually enjoyed that more than
The book, yeah, there'll be a lot of us for the way about books, right? Okay, so think about when you're a teenager, and that people say, because a lot of this happens at the young adult level. Young adults should not be reading certain books. That's what kind of the theory of banning books is. What do you think teenagers do when people say you can't do something? They rebel, right? And so think about my favorite book when I was growing up was To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay, and I just, yeah. So a ton of parallels from my own life. The main character was named Jean Louise. My name is Gina Louise. So I was just I'm finished. Okay, mine is one letter, right? And so my father was a lawyer in a small town. So the whole thing, it was just I was a mirror for me, right? And so that's often on the banned books list, right? And so I have to think of ways to defend it. So that's going to be kind of what this presentation is about, is thinking through, well, what do we say when people say some of these books should be banned? Okay. So this idea of banning books, when I think about it as a librarian who's passionate against it, the scene that comes to mind is actually a scene that I experienced as a high school kid. I can't remember what high school year, but my favorite Indiana Jones, and I think it's the best one, is the third one. The third one. There's a scene where Indiana Jones he has to go undercover as a Nazi spy to do something. I can't exactly remember, but he comes upon a book burning scene. Okay, and so in my head, this is what I see as book banning. But what I'm going to talk about after is kind of more of a quiet process that sometimes happens. So I'll just play a little bit of a clip here, and this will be recorded for YouTube on YouTube later. And I think we're gonna have to cut the videos out just because of copyright issues. So you're getting a special edition. Okay. All right. So I'm only gonna play about a minute of the clip. See if the
Boy, we're pilgrims in an unholy land.
Okay, so like in my head, that's, that it's a very public thing, that there's this fire blazing, right? But what actually happens in schools like mine, and sometimes at libraries like this one, it's more of like a quieter process. So I'm gonna talk about 3 books that are my own experience with book challenges or bans. And I can show you like how we acted against them, or sometimes, I think the first one, you'll see that we had to acquiesce a little bit. So the first one, I wouldn't even call it a ban or challenge. It was just an ask for an alternative text. And sometimes what happens is, like in my job, some things that I might not agree with morally or politically, right? I still have to be someone who has to accept everything, like everybody's opinions and everything like that. So when I was at Leyden High School, which is one of the top high schools actually in the state of Illinois, we were working on summer reading. A teacher really wanted to get a summer reading that was captivating, that a lot of students could read, and they were like done with a text that like they were kind of like, well, this text is boring to a lot of kids. And I had just read October Morning, a song from Matthew Shepard, actually in library school. I was doing library classes and being a librarian at the same time. It's just a CPS thing. You could actually do that in Chicago. So October Morning, if you haven't read it, wonderful, wonderful book, often on the banned books list. As show of hands, so I had no context, if you guys know who Matthew Shepard is or was. Yeah, about half. Okay, so just a quick context. Matthew Shepard in the 90s was brutally murdered for being openly gay. Okay. I don't know how to get this right, but I think in like Nebraska, like University of Nebraska. So it was like a small, like a rural area. And the fence is where they found him. Okay. So the book, what's awesome about the book is it's a book of poetry that talks about Matthew Shepard and what happened, but it's from all these different perspectives. So like one little chapter is the stars that we're watching and looking down on him. The other chapter is the fence. Another chapter is perpetrators, right? So like you get all of these different perspectives. It's like a phenomenal book. And we were really excited to share it with students and see what their thoughts were going to be. So I got this email from my principal that said, Gina, we have a request for someone to do an alternative assignment. They're going to come up to you and ask for that, and they have permission to do this. And I was like, it's kind of a vague thing. Like I was like, oh, I didn't really realize I wanted to ask questions, but they were kind of like, you just have to do it. So the kid came up, and when the kid came up, I kind of had an inclination that was like, well, it's probably because it's about Matthew Shepard. Okay, so I was like, okay, well, and when I saw who the kid was, I was pretty surprised. It was like the sweetest student you ever meet. I was just like, oh, okay. And so I didn't ask any questions, try to help her find a book that was like a book of verse, like a novel in verse, just like this is. And we found one. And I did ask, I said, why, what is it, what's wrong with this book? Or like, I just asked it in like probably not even that biased of a way. I said, can I ask you why you're asking for an alternative assignment? And she said, well, it's against my religion. So I said, well, is it the violence? Because it was pretty violent, like it's sad how he died. And she said, no, it's the homosexuality. So that was the blunt conversation. Now, even I don't agree. I think the book would be probably wonderful for this kid to read, eye-opening, whatever it is. But what I thought that family did and that the student did was they made it about their child and not the whole entire school, right? So they didn't say, none of the sophomore students should read this. We're gonna ban this. We're gone with the wind. We're not gonna let anyone read or something. Like they said, could you just give my child an alternate assignment? Which is very different from what's happening right now. Okay. The second book ban, it's kind of a funny story, is Persepolis, which happened in CPS under a CEO that was supportive of democratic policies, okay? Who walked into a school library, it was on display. Persepolis is a graphic novel. Graphic novels often get targeted because they're pictures of something, like violence, sometimes sex, sometimes racism, sometimes whatever, right? So Persepolis, wonderful, wonderful book, one of the first graphic novels that I've ever read, and I thought it was great. There's a scene in there where it's a pretty violent scene, because like Iran was getting taken over, right? And the artist shows it from her perspective. So the story is the CEO walked into the Chicago Public, like to a school library, pull it up, opened one page and was like, kids can't read this. So we got I get an email from the district, and this strange email was like, if you're in a library or you're teaching this book, which I had actually taught that book to students, like that was one of our texts. You have to pull it from the curriculum, pull it off the shelves. Now, I'm just gonna say something about Chicago teachers, the Chicago Teachers Union, if you know anything about CTU, like, I think I almost just kind of started laughing when I read the email, like, I was like, okay, what's gonna be the backlash? Well, within like hours, this is when X was Twitter, and Twitter was still kind of cool, right? Didn't we say that? Okay, they took to social media, Twitter, Facebook, everything, and they just took pictures of CPS students and teachers reading the book. It was kind of a way of like activism, and this is like the early 2010, right? 2012, 2013, those kind of times. And it hit the media. Everybody was kind of like, this, what is this CEO doing? Within a week, she rescinded the ban. She was like, got another email, and it was like, done. So that's kind of how a district-wide, like top down, sometimes things happen. But more and more, what's been happening more recently is kind of what happened to us at East Leyden High School. It was with a book, All Boys Aren't Blue, which is in the back, which maybe you want to get a raffle ticket for. So All Boys Aren't Blue, we had a family, a mom find the book in her son's book bag. She opened it up, read it, whatever portion of it she read, and then said, no one should read this book at Leyden High Schools. Okay, so then from there, that triggered a bigger thing. So then she went to the principal, and we had to kind of do a whole response to that. And what was interesting was, so my counterpart at West Leyden, there's 2 schools in the district. She had worked there for 35 years. It was like one of her last years before retirement. And she had never had a book challenge ban, ever, until 3 years ago when it happened. And so then we were starting to notice what was going on at Downers Grove High Schools, what was happening in Barrington High Schools. And we saw these book bans starting to happen. And we started to form a response. So we had to like make a collection development response. She then hit us with a list of books that had like all of these books should be removed from your high school. Gratefully, our administration pushed back, and in our plan, we just said you had to, one of the stipulations was you had to actually read the entire book. Now, I don't know, like I think about that stipulation, like people still are like afraid we're gonna quiz them or something, that's enough to make them back down. But like, she folded within, she folded, we didn't hear anything more from that family. So, but what that made us do is it really helped us become prepared for, and we have, I went to conferences and went to the book banning sessions to be like, well, what did you guys do? What did you do? Well, this is being hit hard. And some of the times it's people that don't even live in the district that are coming to, they don't have kids in the school district that are coming to the schools to battles. Okay, so there's a lot of parallels. There's a lot of things going on at the same time. So I'm going to talk about some parallels here that are happening that are leading to more and more book bans. So the first is that in publishing, there's like way more diversity out there in who's being published. Okay, so you're getting especially more diverse characters, you're getting more diverse authors being published, more female-led roles, all of these type of things are happening in publishing. And you have covers. I'm going to show you some covers here. They are actually becoming more graphic. Titles are becoming more diverse as well. And librarians, school librarians and public librarians want to also diversifying their collection to meet the needs of a diverse population, right? And not just in Aurora or in Franklin Park, but kind of what's happening in the world. At the same time, you are well aware of political polarization. And this kind of idea of like, oh, we're kind of powerless. Like we felt a little, when it happened to us, we were like, well, we were thrown off guard because we were like, that won't happen here in the park. It's not gonna happen to us, right? And it did, right? And then lastly, that kind of leads to this increase in book challenges and book bans. So a little bit here, I got this from ALA. This is not on the slides. This is what was added. So sorry about that. I just want you to take a look at the numbers. What's new this year? These are from 2023 because it takes it from the year before. This was posted in 2024. What's new this year, like I do this slide group every year for my students, is this one here. Okay, so in 2023, usually we see patrons or parents, individual experiences like what I talked about, right? A family comes in, a parent, a student, a patron. But now we're seeing organized pressure groups trying to talk about certain books should be removed, right? Or a long list of books to be removed. Where does this take place? Now, these numbers a year ago, it was actually flipped. It was more in school libraries. Because there were successes in the school libraries, they went to the public library and tried to do the same thing. Okay, so when these pressure groups started to become more successful, they took it elsewhere. And this is, I show this graph to students and they're like, oh, okay, this is a real thing. So you have a whole almost 2 decades shown here, right? And for like a decade and a half, we have numbers very low. And then, 2020 happens and the numbers increase. But that high, 4,000 titles in 2023, over 4,000 titles. Yeah, so this is definitely a problem. It's definitely something that we're constantly talking about as librarians and school librarians. So something we talk about is covers. It's an interesting thing. So I grew up in Lockport, and went to Lockport High School. If you don't know where Lockport is, it's right by Joliet. It's more a suburb of Joliet than it is a suburb of Chicago. And I would say most of in the 90s, in the late 90s is when I went to high school. And I had a mostly white curriculum. Okay, most of the authors I read were white. Most of the authors were also male. Okay, one AP teacher said you can pick a book from this list, and I was like, oh, the color purple sounds kind of interesting. There's a flower on the cover. I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm getting into. Right? And this is actually the first Black author I had read, like my K through 12 years. Wow. Yeah. So my students said, I have a much more multicultural reading, like reading experience in their lives than I did. And so like when I say that, I'm like, did I read? When I was thinking about it, I'm like, I haven't read any other Black authors. But here's the cover of my high school experience reading this, right? You kind of don't know what you're getting into, right? Here's the latest cover, the color purple. Right. Okay, so that makes this much easier to attack, right? So when people are thinking about like how, like I always try to think of the counter argument. What are they going to go after? Most of the books that are on the banned books list are written by people of color or LGBTQ, or have even just characters in them that are of these like identities. So sometimes the covers kind of make them easy targets, but the things in the books, the content in the books can also make them worth defending, right? So here's some other covers of some of the top books that are banned, and you're going to be like, oh yeah, I can see why they're targeted. Yeah, I put this on display, like, and my students are like, oh, I can't. This book, really? So yeah, I'm like, they tell you how it is. this book, this is such a good book. But yeah, this one's up there too. And hey, you give us, these three are like always on the top 10 for like the last 5 to 10 years. So there's kind of this intersection too, and the public librarians can also talk about if that's happening for them. So for school librarians, nationally, percentages are down for hiring, right, for school librarians. A lot of times if a school librarian retires, they just won't rehire. Just use the library for something or other, like turn it into a classroom, or they're just like, it's another lunchroom or something, or they'll have an assistant. I have a amazing assistant at my high school. They just have her do the job. So not like a certified librarian. Now, I'm lucky in my district that we have one at each campus, but just to be quite honest, we had 5 at one time, 2 at each campus and a chair that went between. And so you can see the cuts have happened. In Chicago, which is different now, they just want a contract to get more school librarians, if you're paying attention to that. When I was a school librarian there, we had 125 school librarians for 600 schools. So yeah, 450 schools-ish didn't have a school librarian. So that you can kind of see what happened. So the intersection here is that when you have few and fewer school librarian, it becomes very easy to challenge a banned school. When you do, like, okay, you want me to pull this book? Okay, I don't want the fight, and I don't have someone staff in the library to help me fight this. They just start to pull the books off the shelves. So some ways to promote banned books, if you're looking for some ways to like fight against them. Okay, from ALA, American Library Association, they have this like program called Unite Against Banned Books, and they'll give you suggestions on like what you can do as an individual to like join the cause in uniting against banned books. Banned Books Week happens every late September, early October, and I think in 2025 it's the first week in October. They kind of like switch up. And that's a great, they do all this promotion. That's when they share all the new data. So you're like, okay, wonder what it is for 2024. And that's when ALA will come out and say, here's how many books are actually being banned from last year. Okay. There's something called the Abe Lincoln List in Illinois. It's an award-winning list of young adult books. Young adult books are often targeted because they're like, oh, young adults shouldn't be reading Gone with the Wind, right? Like, they can't do this, right? Or Newton's Law of Physics, right? But like the Abe Lincoln List, yeah, it's a great list, 20 books every year. And sometimes we find like a lot of teachers at my school will read them, whether they're teaching them or not, just because they can talk to students about the books. They say, hey, you know, this is a great book, you should read. And then for us, we look at starred reviews, and I'm sure the librarians back there, we kind of defend everything actually in our the collection development we had to create after that banned book situation happened. We talk about how we look at starred reviews. Every book we buy has to be reviewed in a journal. So it's also a way that you can you know, fight back and see what books to purchase or check out from your awesome local library. So here's a little bit about how I teach about banned books. And I have another little handout that I might hand out. I think we could probably do this. I do think we have time. So I'll have probably Ethan come up and pass these out. Yeah. But the way that I talk about banned books is that there's a history of it in this country. And even before the book that I'm going to talk about, there was book banning. But the book that was widely banned first, like the first banned book, was actually Uncle Tom's Cabin. Okay, so Uncle Tom's Cabin, written in the 1800s. Abraham Lincoln, the story is, there is a story, I don't know if it's true, but that Abraham Lincoln met Harriet Beecher Stowe and said, so you're the young woman who started this war. Yeah, so the book was like that big of a deal back in the day, right? So she wrote it, and in the north, in the north, everyone bought it. And you were like, this is terrible, to show the horrors of slavery. And people start saying, well, we need to fight against it. People shouldn't own other people. And that's basically what Uncle Tom's Cabin showed, the terrors and horrors of slavery, right? Well, it hits the South, okay, people buy it, and then they're like, we need to ban this, because then everyone's going to want to get rid of slavery. So that was the first like major book ban in the United States. Was this one to get rid of slavery, and sometimes it's called one of the causes of the Civil War. So one way that I talk to kids about covers and jackets, and that's, I think, something for you guys, as you guys noticed when I did that. And then just to make it relevant, these are actually two of my favorite. This is my favorite young adult book, so I'm kind of categorize my favorite. So Speak is one of my favorite, probably my favorite young adult. And Stamped is a also wonderful nonfiction book about it's teaching United States history, but from a very different perspective than what I learned when I told you, like, I learned a very white version of history as well. This is not that version. Okay, so if you guys can go to the stamps, is that the first one? Sorry, I don't
Yeah.
have a- Okay, yeah. Okay, so this is an excerpt. So a lot of times what book banners do is they take excerpts and they'll put it on a big placard, or they'll take the one page and they'll be like, this is why this book should be banned. Okay, so maybe we'll just try this with Stamped first. And might not have time for Speak, but that's okay. So go ahead and take, it's just one page. The rest is from the book Speak. You probably need about 2 or 3 minutes. We'll see how it goes. Just go ahead and read this page from Stamped and think about, why would somebody put pressure on another person? Like, why would somebody want to ban this just from this excerpt? And why is this actually something important? So go ahead. Okay, the librarians have told me the back, maybe I need to read a little bit for the virtual audience. So sorry that we're getting a reread. So I'm not gonna read the whole thing. I'll just read to the Honest Abe part. So this is in chapter 13. This is this book. In case you put in for this book, I mean, I read it 2 years ago when it first, well, three years ago when it first came out. And I didn't know half the thing. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I kept researching. I was like, oh wow, I should have learned all these things and didn't. So yeah, it's a great book. So chapter 13 is entitled Complicated Abe. When we think of Abraham Lincoln, we think Honest Abe, black suit, white shirt, top hat, beard, the great emancipator. One of the best, or at least most, known and loved presidents in America's history. That's what we're taught. But Lincoln wasn't that simple. As I mentioned at the start of this journey, life rarely fits neatly into a box. People are complicated and selfish and contradictory. I mean, if there's anything we've learned from Thomas Jefferson, it's that you can be anti-slavery and not anti-racist. You cannot see Black people as people, but know that mistreating them and enslaving them are bad for business, bad for your brand, bad for your opportunity. That's more in line of who Lincoln was. Gasp. I know. This would mean we'd have to perhaps rethink the whole Honest Abe thing. It wasn't that great of a nickname anyway. Okay. And so then, just for context for the virtual joiners, it talks about something that I didn't know, that hundreds of thousands of slaves freed themselves before emancipation even happened. I didn't think the number was that high. In my head, I was like, I don't even know what I would have made a guess is, probably 20,000, not hundreds of thousands. I don't know if you are in agreement or not, but to know that is kind of like, why didn't I learn that, right? But I'm saying too much here. So why do you think that someone would say, we gotta ban this, just from that excerpt? Why would someone find it problematic? Yeah,
kind of putting down the image of Abe, who's kind of like, you know, seen as a great leader. He's like a very recognizable United States, you know, American hero kind of thing of
Yes.
this amazing thing.
mhm.
And it's kind of starting to question, like, maybe he wasn't like the perfect gentleman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, the Abe chapter is one of the less critical, like they're much harder on other people, but I just put the Abe out there for Illinois too. But like, but I found it, when I read that, I kept reading it because I was like, I knew I was critical of the other people as well in the book, but that one I was like, I really didn't know these things. So yeah.
So also I was thinking, I was kind of thinking of lines with her, and also, this thing about Black people are still less, and it means that they did it on their own. They're
Yes.
courageous, they're valiant, they're smart, they're, you know, just maybe.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands of Black people, while they were enslaved, were able to escape to freedom, right? They didn't have a white savior to do it, right? Yeah, you got it. So then you have to think about, you know, how to defend a work like this. So that's kind of what it comes out to. A lot of book banners will pull one piece of text out. And a lot of times with the graphic novels, it's like one graphic image. Like, you should be reading this, right? And so the big thing I think for us to do is think about ways to combat against it, come with our own placards of the good parts of books. Yeah, we could like know what they actually were coming with. That'd be great. You don't have to read and speak, but it's such a good book. Yeah, you should check it out. But there are a couple excerpts from it on there as well. So it's stamped actually in 2020, I think it was a #1 banned book in America. And they were banning anything by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. Anything that had him, even if they was like in an anthology, they would ban that book. Yeah. And Speak was actually like #3. I couldn't believe it because I was like, why have they got and so yeah, okay, so something about purchasing books. One of the librarians there was talking about, somebody came in, I can't remember who it was like, let's ban the book banners, like when they entered, I was like, this is gonna be a great audience. So yeah, very recently, there's been the Illinois State Librarian, Alexi Julius, and probably his team or whatever, I don't really know how it gets signed. But yeah, they made this bill that got signed into law, state law, that there's a ban against book bans. So basically, it's kind of like, you're like, well, how did they actually do that? So if a book ban comes to us and we like waiver and we say, okay, we're gonna have to actually ban Boys Aren't Blue or Stamped or something like that, we lose state funding. Okay, so that happens in Aurora, same thing would happen to them. Nothing happens to the book banners, which is like, seems a little, but so I don't exactly know, but how it's working, but I think it is because we haven't had a book banner challenge before the law, it was before the law was passed. So I think the librarians would just use that to be like, look, it's state law, like we can't, like the state's behind us too. So we don't want to lose our funding over this. So it kind of gives us a little bit more like fodder, I guess, yeah.
But there are some district school libraries that said, I don't want the funding,
Yes,
I wanna do what I wanna do.
yeah. So that is happening, definitely different areas of the states that they were like. It sometimes that's why I was like, I don't know yet how it's helping or hurting, but people are like, yeah, giving up because there's too much pressure in some different areas, yeah, of the state. So I talked about, getting everything from a library journal or magazine, but also Melinda Lowe, who writes this book, Last Night at Telegraph Club, amazing book. So that what keeps her up at night isn't so much, this book is also on the band list. So she said this, I heard this come driving into work one day, she was on NPR. And what keeps her up at night isn't so much like the loud book banners, right? And she was like, it's the librarians and the school librarians who are up late at night. She's like working by a lamp. She had its whole description, it was great. And she said, who are deciding whether to buy a book or not, and just decide not to because it would cause trouble. So there's also quiet, soft censorship that happens because of like, maybe we shouldn't do this, right? They don't want to ruffle the feathers, right? Like, rock the boat. So preparing for book bans in Pennsylvania, I think again around 2020, when all this stuff was starting to happen, they're trying to ban just even like books about Rosa Parks, right? Books about what'd you say?
The Holocaust.
The Holocaust, right? Books about civil rights movement, books by any author, right? Like all this, is like. I remember one was like a Sesame Street DVD about something,
Yeah.
right? That they were trying to ban, and the students actually worked and overturned the ban in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. So what it helped me to do, and what it probably is helping your librarians to do, just like we're working behind the scenes to firm up our library collection policies. So that's what it helped us do, is like we weren't ready for it, and we were like, okay, how are we gonna do better at this? So they're going to tell you in about 3 minutes or so what how they're doing that here. And then I'm like, come ready with your signs. Like if you see this kind of happening at your town, or if meetings are happening and you're kind of hearing things of this notion, I say, attend the library board meetings, consider running for library boards. Okay, if you're on a library board, you can help make decision, or if you know somebody you think would be great, like get them to run for library boards. A lot of times people run like unopposed, right? So like, it's kind of like, it might be good for some new folks in there if you need it, and kind of know your opposition. It's always for us, like I think of the Downers Grove incident, where it was a graphic novel. And the people came in with the graphic novel on a big placard, parts of it that they thought made the whole book be banned. And it was like, I wonder if they knew in advance what book it was, and they might have. And so could people come with this wonderful picture from the book, or this quote that was worth having the book for, if that would be kind of match fire with fire. We do have some time for questions. And I'll kind of save this video for the end if we have time. So if you guys have any questions, or anybody online has questions, and then the Aurora Public Librarians, they also want to talk about what they're doing to fight against book bans. Yeah.
And how they're being funded, and how they're growing, because it's I feel it's something even bigger than that, And,
Yeah.
Because the books, regardless of the concepts, it's the ideas that they want to shut down, and it's the our thinking process and keep it in a little box and contained, so it's like a power struggle. So, and I always think, you know, like, the power seems to be, you know, our power making choices. And like, it's almost like we're powerless. And I guess even if we move to like other states, we're, you know, now the minority in thinking that everything should be out there, you know. That's how it feels like.
Yeah, there is, I think, a sense of powerlessness, especially when I showed you that little graph about like the pie chart with, that it's organized groups that are kind of like making up a lot. Yeah, the pressure groups. The biggest pressure group that's working against this is the Moms of Liberty.
Yeah.
What I was looking at when I was even creating this presentation is that there's now a counter movement. I think it's like against moms, it's not creative, it's not creative, it's like against Moms of Liberty, but they're actually doing a really great job to try and dismantle it and act against it. So that wasn't there 2 to 3 years.
People go for, Guardian, there's the Guardian, and there's another one, and they, sometimes those things, they take out like, oh, this is dangerous, you know, dangerous ideas that cause whatever, so they make it seem, I don't know, this is used by polarization, but, it's, they,
It's gonna harm, it's
they, well, they make it, they actually, I don't wanna say they lie, but they do, so,
Yeah.
they, like when you leave out all the details, and then you make it seem like, there's, revolutionary activities going on or something, and that's why this needs to be banned, yeah, it's like blatantly lies.
Yeah.
And that's probably the scary thing, because it's like, they're containing us, and you've seen it like with Hitler, and you've seen it with like different, like, when they try to, still growth in certain, I don't know, but.
You're doing okay, yeah. No, I think you're right on target. I was doing a lesson with my students. I was helping them with research as AP students. They were doing a research seminar, like for an AP class. And we found some information on, I think it was like, they were doing some research on like, I think trauma with people of color. And there was something on a government website. And I was like, I told the kid, I was like, you're gonna wanna save this, cause it's gonna be scrubbed. So it's not just the Moms of Liberty. I was like, the government websites are
And,
erased too.
just,
So.
you know, like, a lot of people don't wanna talk about it, because, they don't wanna be blacklisted in some kind of way.
Yeah.
So it's easier to not talk about it.
Mhm. Oh, definitely. Yeah, yeah. I'm definitely much more conscious now of when I write. So I've written about 100, I would say 90 to 100 op-eds about education. They're all different issues, since 2012. So, 13 years of different op-eds. And this year, probably, I'm much more, cognizant of like, should I send this out or not? So. Other people have questions?
Thanks, Mom, as in jobs.
Oh, nobody did, okay.
No?
She said no, she was
Okay.
working it back there. Yeah. Yeah,
So when Illinois banned the banned books,
yeah.
were there books that were under challenge at that time, and did that still under review?
I'm sure across the states, they're just go, do they go away then? No, I think like this participant said, it's up to each individual like school district and library to say, no, we're not gonna do it because of the state law, like we want our funding, or you know what, the pressure's too high. It's probably not just one person in that case, like the pressure's too high. I don't wanna be in the media, I don't wanna be like, I don't want this at my school, or, right? So we're gonna just like, we'll take the book off the shelf, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, exactly, and there's so many municipalities, there's so many school districts that it's hard to, I think, implement. Statewide, it does give us like leverage, leverage we didn't have before, but.
I don't know if you guys are aware or not, but they even be in children, like,
Mm-hmm.
young children's books like Charlotte's Web.
Yeah.
Because there's talking animals. It's the most-
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter, I mean, even,
That's on the list.
even Captain Underhand.
Yeah.
I mean, the most ridiculous, like, these kids get no clue of what these people are talking about, but there are so many young children's books that have been banned, and it's baffling.
Yeah.
It really is. You should look it up and you'll sit there and go, "That's kidding me."
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious about how this is like state to state. Are there certain states where there's an increase in book bans versus other states? I haven't really paid attention to what that would look like.
Yeah, there's definitely, you can look at, I'm sure there's statistics out there from state to state, and then I think, the daughter has.
Yes.
Yeah, so this patron has a daughter who's like in Indiana, she works at a University of Indiana, and she's like, yeah, they're having a lot more than we're seeing in Illinois. But not even just state to state, but like region to region. So I've been to a library conference, went to Illinois State and did something similar like this. And there were members there from like, the middle of the state, or even south, like Carbondale, all these other areas. And they were like, well, this works fine in Chicago and Chicagoland, but not out here. Like, we can't. We have to like, do what like, if they're living in a very conservative rural district, it's hard for them to fight back. Yeah. Or even take a stand, right, to say, in the most like unbiased way, these books should, if you don't want to read it, you don't have to read it, but somebody else might want to, like, that's the most unbiased way of saying that, right? Yeah,
But that's threatening because they don't think the way you want them to think.
correct, right, yeah,
I saw your chart on the book being banned.
yeah.
What do you think made them want to ban it more towards 2020?
Yeah, so 2020 is also like the timeline that Moms of Liberty group came out, and it came out because of COVID. So there was a big shift in America, as we all know. Everybody got to see what was happening at school in 2020, because like the kids were home. And sometimes you had to participate in the school, like I had to, like, my son was 5 learning to read, and so I was there with him, helping to teach him how to read, right? So then I got to see everything he was reading, so that started happening, across the United States, everywhere across the world, right? And this group not only coalesced they really wanted kids back in school, right? They were like, well, what are these mask things, right? But they also didn't want, they also saw like what was happening at the school level and didn't like it. So it's this big parents' choice. It's framed as parents' choice movement. But it is restricting like curriculum, books, and then now moving to the public libraries. Yeah. Yeah.
And I can see it too, like, so I'm very Christian, but I believe in openness, so it's like a weird contradictory kind of thing that would be like in the churches. And I remember like what you mentioned, they were teaching that child about how different places have worshiping. It's not so much worshiping the devil, like together and white clothes.
Oh, Dia de los Muertos, yeah.
But that it's a culture thing and not just there, but it's normalized in other things. And so we read the Bible and my daughter's like all freaked out, and I'm like, yeah, something we learn or whatever. And it's like in an educator setting, and so I prefer things in the open than in the closed. But the thing that I get out with the bands is it takes our liberty away. It takes our thought process. It does so much damage because it contains us. It we're like it's like with minorities, it's like it keeps us in a subservient position because we can't grow because we're now we now fit in this section and that's where we belong and there's nothing contrary to that. Just-
Yeah, and like I said, the publishing has come such a far way, like as a school librarian, like I don't remember going to my school library and seeing so many different covers of like, people of color being on the covers even.
Yeah.
Like I was like the authors will talk about, there was an author who was Filipino and his main character was a Filipino American who then went to the Philippines, and on the cover, they put a kid who in artwork was Filipino, and he's like, this is the first time I've been able to see myself on a book. Where for so like, you know what I mean? So like now finally like publishing, I feel like has like risen to the occasion, but now some other forces are stamping them out.
There's a fear.
Yeah, so Ethan wants to come and talk about a little bit about Aurora, right?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to wrap up with our sharing our own collection development policy. So let me pull this up.
Oh, it's okay.
So our collection development policy goes over how we procure materials, how we accept and process donations, and how we handle book challenges. This policy can be found by going to aurorapubliclibrary.org and scrolling all the way down to where it says policies. And if you click on that, you can find our collection development policy right at the top here. So for example, there's some criteria that we use to determine which materials are added to our collection, and they include, but are not limited to, community needs and demand, the value and accuracy of information, representation of various viewpoints, relevance to the experience and contributions of diverse populations. Separately, our collection is also constantly being maintained. So items may be withdrawn from the library's collection to ensure that a collection meets our community's needs. So items may be withdrawn due to low usage or checkouts, poor physical condition, space limitations. If there's similar information that's available elsewhere, or we just don't need, or something's outdated or inaccurate. So withdrawn items might be placed in our book sale, or donated to other nonprofit organizations or recycled or discarded. Our policy regarding book challenges is also pretty straightforward. We refer to them as requests for reconsideration. And so our policy states that any Aurora Public Library District resident or taxpayer may request the reconsideration of the inclusion or exclusion of an item by completing a request for reconsideration form or by writing a letter or email that includes the information asked for on the form. Each request must be for a single item, and no item will be reviewed more than once in a 12-month period. Material will remain in circulation during this reconsideration process. The executive director or designee will review the request and reply promptly. The requester may appeal their decision to the Board of Library Trustees at a regularly scheduled meeting, or the board in writing. And then final authority for reconsideration rests with the Board of Library Trustees. So that all this information can be found on the collection development policy. And then we also have an online form that you can fill out, or a printable form from that same website. If anybody has any questions about these policies, you can feel free to ask us. I'd be happy to answer them for you or put you in touch with the right person. So thank you, Dr. Caneva, for this presentation, and thank you everyone for coming out.